What we believe matters. Over the course of your life, mine, there come times when we have to let go of unworkable beliefs. We find that what we have been taught or deeply held is not adequate for what life has put in our path. And we set off on a spiritual journey to find something more life-giving and true. Spiritual journeys will be our theme this summer. Reverend Cantor, Reverend Dana, and I will be reflecting on questions such as, what beliefs have we had to relinquish? And what new discoveries have we made? What journeys have our forebearers made that matter for us today? What journeys have changed our lives forever? Who journeys with us? For whom do our spiritual journeys matter beyond our personal lives? Spiritual journeying is at the heart of our Unitarian Universalist way of being religious. It defines something about who we are. We are the people for whom questing and questioning are spiritual obligations. We are the people who do not rest easy with religious ideas that are contrary to reason or science or experience. We say no to dangerous gods or ideologies or idols that cause harm and justify oppression or inequity or violence. Our divine discontent makes us persistent thinkers, eager learners, adventurers of the Spirit. I received a thank you card once for our congregation when we had taken an unpopular stand on an issue in our community. The thank you card paraphrased a quote from Henry David Thoreau, one of our favorite Unitarian forebearers, and it showed a picture of a kind of scruffy little guy beating on a drum and marching along, and it said, "I like you. You march to the beat of a different drummer." Then opening the card, on the inside was a picture of a whole raggle-taggle band of people marching with drums and horns and banners. And it read, "In fact, the whole band is weird." Now, whether you like thinking of Unitarian Universalism that way, the point is you are part of a band. Progressive people of faith are not just radical individuals. We are part of a movement, a spiritual community, journeying together over time across generations, moving away from beliefs that cause harm and towards beliefs that offer hope, compassion, justice, liberation from oppression. And our journeying matters not only for ourselves, but for our society. Consider where we are right now as a country. These past 18 months have brought us to our knees. The grief of so many lives lost to COVID, the moral outrage at the fresh revelations of racial injustice, the tragic growing impacts of climate change, and in the midst of it all, deepening political, social, and cultural divides that are tearing our country apart, threatening our democracy, and led to a violent assault on the U.S. Capitol. The January 6th insurrection was deeply traumatizing to anyone who believes in the rule of law and democratic process, regardless of whether you prefer the policies of Democrats or Republicans. And one of the things we need to face is that the violent assault was stirred up by religious leaders and religious beliefs. Peter Montgomery, a journalist who focuses on studying the religious right, reports in the American Prospect, quote, right-wing pastors, religious leaders, and activists and conservative Christian media aggressively promoted then President Donald Trump's false assertion that he won the 2020 presidential election. They portrayed efforts to stop the steal as part of a spiritual war between good and evil. In their telling, Trump was the divinely anointed leader of the forces of light, and his opponents were agents of Satan. Televangelist Rick Joyner announced that God had seeded the country with Christian militias in preparation for civil war. And Eric Metaxas, a popular right-wing Christian author, warned that if Trump didn't declare martial law, then the Christian militias would be, quote, forced to engage in a even more bloody war. The night before the January 6th assault on the Capitol, a massive religious rally was held in Washington, D.C. People chanted over and over again, victory or death. And one minister prevailed upon the whole crowd to swear an oath together that concluded with the words, as a minister of God, I lead sheep, I feed sheep, and I kill wolves. A recent sociological study of those who have been arrested notes that what the insurrectionists most strongly hold and held in common is the fear that the identity of white America is being overtaken and destroyed by people of color. And in a forthcoming Christian Century article, theologian Rita Nakashima-Brock writes, quote, the Capitol riots made fully visible the collusion of white Christian evangelicals with white nationalism in a criminal grab for power. Rioters carried pictures of a white Jesus in a red MAGA cap and a gallows with a noose, shouting, "Hang Mike Pence." A rioting man in horns and fur stood in the Senate chamber and blessed the siege in the name of Christ. Violent, racist, white Christianity has a long history. And as a theologian who identifies as a Christian as well as a Unitarian Universalist, I have worked and studied to understand the religious roots of whiteianity, as Black humanist William R. Jones calls it. These roots go all the way back to our Puritan forebears who crossed the Atlantic on a mission to found a new world purified of evil. In their theology of spiritual warfare, violence was a sacred tool of divine justice and power, and the indigenous people they encountered were either to be converted to Christianity or destroyed as devils. One influential Puritan preacher praised the smoke rising from the burning of an indigenous village as a sweet incense, a sacrifice to God. The embrace of holy violence has its roots, even more deeply in the turn that Western Christianity took in the 10th century, when it began placing images of the dead Christ, tortured and crucified, as the central image in Christian sanctuaries, an image that had not been central for the first 1,000 years of Christianity. And they changed the meaning of the communion from a ritual celebrating the victory of life into a reenactment of the killing of Jesus as a sacred sacrifice to expiate human sin. Sophia Faz was thinking of our children when she wrote, "Some beliefs are divisive, separating saved from unsaved, friend from enemies. But these words counsel all of us to journey beyond belief systems that justify traumatic wounding as holy." That spiritual journey has a long history as well, and our ancestors are part of it. In 1805, Hosea Ballou, often called the father of American Universalism, was deeply disturbed by Christian preachers threatening people with terrifying visions of hell and promising that just a few would be saved by God, those who believed in the redeeming violence of Jesus' death. Ballou questioned those beliefs. He said such a God was not worthy of our worship. Furthermore, he said, such a God was dangerous. He wrote, quote, "The belief that the great Jehovah was offended with his creatures to that degree that nothing but the death of Christ or the endless misery of mankind could appease his anger is an error that has been fatal to the life and spirit of Christ. All those principles which are to be dreaded by men have been believed to exist in God, and professors have been molded into an image of their deity and become more cruel." Ballou went further. He said hell is to be found here and now in this life. Hell is of human making when we betray one another, oppress, and injure each other. He said heaven can be found here and now too, in the blessings of life. The devil, he came to believe, is not an actual being, but a symbol for that which tricks us into believing lies, investing ourselves in something we think is of value but is not of value, while ignoring the things that are true and worthy of our devotion. Ballou's view of Satan echoed John Milton, who wrote a generation before in Paradise Lost, in the aftermath of the failed, violent Puritan revolt in England. In Paradise Lost, Satan operates through three disguises, three masks: pomp, fraud, and greed. Pomp, inflated displays of glory and power. Fraud, lies dressed up in seductive promises. Greed, the underlying spiritual sickness of those who deceive and exploit for their own benefit. Ballou, as well as Milton, quested for an answer to what will save us from evil. Not the atoning death of Jesus on the cross, but something else. Love. Ballou came to believe only love will save us. God's universal, all-inclusive love. And atoning grace flows to us, he said, not through violence, but through beauty. Beauty that opens our hearts and our senses and has the power to draw us towards what is true. Ballou followed Christ as an embodiment of the beauty of compassion, moral courage, and inclusive love. He spoke of the natural world as well as shining with beauties that can heal us. Atoning grace comes like spring rain, moistening and infusing our dry, thirsty souls, renewing our capacity to love, and awakening us to holiness and happiness. As the poet Elizabeth Barrett Browning would later write in a sentiment close to Ballou's, earth's crammed with heaven, and every common bush afire with God. But only he who sees takes off his shoes. The rest sit round and pluck blackberries. What lessons can we draw for today from these ancestors? Here, briefly, are three. First, let us claim with devoted hearts that progressive religion offers powerful alternatives to the religious frameworks of meaning that are fueling violence and division in our country. It matters that we teach our children the theological wisdom hard won by our ancestors in their struggle with dangerous ideas about God. And while we may shy away from evangelism in the polite belief that we should respect others' beliefs, we should not shy away from addressing the dangers of people's beliefs and inviting people into a different way, actively working for social policies that embody the life-giving values of progressive religion. Second, let us fearlessly and tenderly inquire of ourselves whether we are holding to beliefs that cause harm to ourselves or to others. Here are some of the kinds of questions we must ask, looking deeply and even facing painfully. Are we investing in false gods, in ways of life that are not sustainable and just? Are we comfortable with benevolent paternalism, but not with inclusion and equity? And do we hold beliefs about ourselves, such as that we are not worthy of love or of healing, or that everything is fine while we deny the reality of our pain and the presence of injustice in the world? We must set out on spiritual journeys that grapple with these questions. Thirdly, let us embrace the saving grace of beauty and attend to the beauty present here and now that can reorient us to what matters most when we have been deceived into serving false gods. Let us honor the marginalized voices of those who know that beauty insists on our attention, who themselves have experienced how terribly the disparagement of beauty harms lives, and have become prophetic witnesses calling the human family to accountability. As James Baldwin writes at the end of The Fire Next Time, after exposing the harms of racism, he calls white people of conscience to join together in respectful collaboration with people of color to transform the devastations of white supremacy. And he calls by asking this question: what shall we do with all this beauty? Blessings on your journey, my friends. May you heed the call of beauty and offer your devoted service in return. May the ancestors accompany you on your way. May your journey lead you to take off your shoes, to know you are standing on holy ground. As Rumi said, may the beauty we love become the good we do. There are 1,000 ways to kneel and kiss the ground. May it be so. Amen.